all know about the assassination of Franz Ferdinand. On the 28th of June 1914, but less well known is the story of Nedeljko Gabrinovich attempting the same feat earlier that same day. He threw a grenade at the Archduke's vehicle as it paraded through the town, only to see it parried aside by the Archduke himself. But thou not still catch a grenade. It exploded, injuring a dozen or so people. Gabrinovich, by this point, had already swallowed a dose of poison and thrown himself into the river. Unfortunately for him, this all served only to make a fool of him as he threw up the expired poison and was unable to drown himself, seeing as the water was only 4 inches deep. But this was far from the only ill-fated assassination the history books have to offer. Here are some of the weirder ones. Despite having already served as president, Theodore Roosevelt found himself campaigning for the presidency again in 1912 with his newly formed Progressive Party. He lost the election, but was fortunate not to lose his life too, as witnesses to his attempted assassination at the hands of a certain John Fleming Schrank will say. This particular assassination attempt can only really be described as unlucky. While Roosevelt was shot in the chest, his life was saved by his eyeglass case and a copy of one of his speeches, a 50-page speech, mind you. So the 3 square inches of his chest that were protected were by some obscene stroke of luck, exactly where he was hit. He even delivered a campaign speech right afterwards, where he announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I've just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." A bull moose, by the way, is a supporter of the Progressive Party. Unfortunately, donkeys and elephants have taken over since this incident. To be a former president. Now let's talk about Winston Churchill. In 1943, he was the subject of a Nazi assassination plot. The plan was to somehow get an exploding chocolate bar into number 10, with his appetite hopefully doing the rest of the work. If successful, this booby-trapped piece of confection would have been able to detonate anyone within a few meters of him. Thankfully, and unsurprisingly, this plan never came close to fruition, as the MI5 caught wind of the plan well before any chocolate bars were able to explode anyone's face off. You'd think that lining luxury goods with explosives in order to kill world leaders would have been written off after this incident. The CIA, however, had other ideas. The United States loves making the nature of foreign regimes their own business. As residents of Libya, Mexico, Samoa, Hawaii, Panama, Honduras, Cuba, Nicaragua, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Russia, Japan, Italy, France, Belgium, the Netherlands, the Philippines, South Korea, China, Greece, Costa Rica, Albania, Syria, Myanmar, Egypt, Iran, Guatemala, Paraguay, Indonesia, Lebanon, Vietnam, Iraq, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Laos, Brazil, Cambodia, Chile, Bolivia, Uruguay, Ethiopia, Angola, Afghanistan, Poland, El Salvador, Chad, Grenada, former Yugoslav nations, Venezuela, Palestine, and Yemen will tell you. These interventions often cost other world leaders their lives. However, there was one man they infamously never got to. Fidel Castro, longtime president of Cuba, was the man in question. He reportedly survived 638 attempts on his life over the course of 4 decades. These ranged from attempts to shoot him, to whacking a poisonous substance into a ballpoint pen, to a scuba suit infested with bacteria that causes tuberculosis, to cigars infected with the toxin that causes botulism. Clearly they weren't that aware that Cuban healthcare would have dealt with that easily. To an inordinate amount of explosives chucked under a stage upon which he was to deliver a speech, to lacing his radio booth with LSD, to, of course, a cigar which was meant to explode, but never reached the lips of Fidel Castro. The early attempts were especially absurd, as America's obsession with killing Castro was such that they suspended their campaign against organized crime in the States to enlist the support of the mafia in order to make professional work of the assignment. Beyond getting discovered before they could get a clear shot at him, numerous mafia informants chickened out of operations aimed at poisoning Castro's food, or were interrupted by heightened missile-induced political tensions, which may have been released to an apocalyptic effect in the event that Castro was to be assassinated. They even paid off a formal one-night stand of Castro's. Fidel was probably the least appropriate name for this chap, to leave poisoned face cream in his hotel room. Castro inevitably found out, but handed her a gun and invited her to fire it at him. The fact that this didn't result in him getting shot, it must be said, should have alerted the US government to the harsh reality that Castro was, as far as they were concerned, untouchable. Can't touch this! But hey, instead I have a stupidly expensive, pointlessly elaborate wild goose chase to tell you about. That concludes my rundown. I hope you enjoyed. To those planning on carrying out assassinations in the future, I would encourage you to acknowledge that even the pros get it wrong sometimes, and to attempt to learn from the mistakes of their predecessors. That's all. I hope to see you in the next video. Till then, cheerio. He's got a massive hat, a tiny twat, and he's not welcome on your mobile screens. Monty and the chaps.